Niv Fux, and I'm very happy to welcome Johannes Gierlinger here with us today, who is presenting in the festival with his film. So, Johannes Gierlinger studied at the Academy for Fine Arts in Vienna, and his work engages with history, memory, resistance, and their form of representation in spaces of possibilities. He explores reading, doubts, and possible future images in the form of essayistic works. His work has been shown at the Austrian International Film Festival and institutions including Vision de Real, Verklied Center for Media Art, CPH Docs, IFA Gallery Stuttgart, Edinburgh, and many more. So thank you for joining us. Your film, Remapping the Origins, will be screened today in the program Place of History. And I think the film kind of set out to uncover and trace the history of Bialystok, right? But to its rich past, but at the same time it also wishes to shed light on what is yet to come in the future. And I think indeed it's very interesting that the film was made in 2018, but you can kind of feel the Russian-Ukraine war sort of echoing throughout the film, and it comes to mind with the context of horrific battles that this place or this region has seen. So I was wondering what maybe a bit from the few years that passed since and now in the kind of world we live in today, what else do you feel like the film can tell us about the current reality or maybe what we will be facing in the future?
I mean, what I tried with the film was basically look at the history of the 20th century till the 21st century and see how fast like a city and its pluralistic kind of population changed to a more or less homogenic city with a population of mostly Polish people, and also try to see in this kind of history the struggle that was around this area, from big anarchist movement to also like the Industrial Revolution was very strong there. It was called the Manchester of the North, for example. And try to see also like how this kind of struggles kept on going in a way, because in the beginning of the 20th century there was a really big anarchist movement that was part of Russian revolution struggle, and then also like something like that reappeared in around 2000. That was of course smaller, but it was like kind of for me this kind of question: how do things like reappear in different shape, but also like in the context of history? Related to the conflict now, it's very difficult. On the one hand, I think Bialystok is really on the border to Belarus, and is kind of a city that feels a little bit like that it's forgotten historically also, but also like in the kind of development. Although the city looks nice now and there's a lot of money put in from the European Union, but still a lot of people leave. And I think basically I haven't been there since like 2018, and I would be more curious what people think who are close to this area. Because it's like there is a constant kind of there was a constant way of transfer between Belarus and Poland. I'm not sure how it's now, because it's really close and
Yeah, and you mentioned this idea of how, and this is also kind of, we see this thread along the film about this idea of history being forgotten but also repeating itself. And I was wondering more on a kind of philosophical level, do you think that we as a society are fail to recognize the importance and to understand the implication of history, or which leads us into making the same mistake again, or is it just this inevitable course of events?
Well, the failure maybe is something that is very strong connected also to how do we remember and recollect memory, and this is something that is always shaped by politics or who is ruling a country. And I think for sure we are failing, but we're not totally failing. I mean, it's for me something, and that's the interesting part for me, like going into a city, coming as an outsider and try to understand and see on the fragments of representation of historical events, like even if it's just a monument, what does it tell on, do we recognize this monument even? Which is, I think Robert Musil said, like, normally you don't recognize a moment, it doesn't tell you anything, you just pass. And the city itself, for example, is full of monuments, full of kind of, but it's sometimes really dead in this sense, this history. And for sure the politics also try to make a new narrative how to tell the history. For example, in Bialystok, there is remembrance for the ghetto uprising, which is small mostly, but there's a big event, like I show in the film also, where all the schools from the region are coming for like a march, remembering the victims of Stalin. So this is something that I'm interested, like how do basically institutional or politics shape a kind of narration, and how can a film also like try to, with the method of essayistic film, you make detours and try to make connections, make it a little bit visible also, like that this is not very linear, so you have like many different kind of ellipses that come together maybe in a film.
Mm-hmm. And how did you first encounter the idea to make this film, or what was the kind of background leading to it?
It was very simple. I read an article in a newspaper about Zamenhof, who was born there and who invented the language Esperanto. Not directly, he had his first ideas in this village or in this city. And I was just interested, and then I thought, like, because this kind of text was also connected to the idea of Zamenhof inventing a language to connect people. And because there were many different languages on the street, and he thought, like, it's strange that no one speaks to each other, Polish, Jewish people, like, and even like it was way bigger. It was from Russia, from Belarus, so it was really a multi-ethnic city. Mm-hmm. And the article said then that it's strange that now it's so homogenic, and even a big, or let's say one of the strongest right-wing movements in Poland are based in this kind of area. And that was the encounter, and I thought, like, this could be leading to a film that tells about the transition of a city, but this transition stays or can be seen also like to a transition that we see a lot in Europe.
Yeah, it's reflecting a lot of other processes that we kind of saw happening in Europe. Yeah, I was wondering, in the film you quote philosopher Holbach, and the quote is, "The totality of past events can be summed into an image under one term. Those events must be abstracted from the group that keeps them in mind." That's a very interesting quote, and I was wondering if you can expand a bit on what does this mean for you, or this kind of notion of abstracting it from the original context in a way.
I mean, Halbach's invented kind of, or I don't know if he invented, but he wrote a lot. He wrote this very famous book about collective memory, and that it's always linked to a social group. And I think the thing is to get this the distance from this social, or to recognize what is really part of a group. You need a distance that can be, from in my point of view, I think he never wrote about this, but I thought for me it would be art or a film that can like distract this kind of make this distance. And for sure, what a collective what you need for remembrance is a society that is that has a narration, and I think with art you can make kind of a different kind of narration, and make it also like different visible, and put kind of an abstraction also to this kind of linear telling of history, because the interesting part for me about collective memory is also that we have to be very aware who is shaping this collective memory, who is represented and who is not represented, and who remembers. I mean, what we will face is for sure that a lot of, I mean, this is normal, but a lot of things will be not remembered because at a certain point the group is dead who had the real memory. So I think with Halbwachs it's really a complex book, but for me it gave me kind of this encounter also to think about collective memory, but maybe more like from an artistic point of view.
Yeah.
Using the philosophy, but this links also in my work a lot to Walter Benjamin, for example, because I think he wrote really, I mean, in the thesis of philosophy in the book, it really gives a different point of view how to read history, not like a historian, but say that the dead are still alive in a way, you know, to say that. I think he was in conflict a little bit with Horkheimer because he said that the slain are dead, and in this kind of sense, and Benjamin was more like, no, they're not dead, they are still alive in kind of, or we feel this, or we can put a different kind of perspective on it, maybe through art, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting because this I feel like the film takes this kind of hybrid approach in a sense that there is of course the narration and the voice of you as a filmmaker in the film and your perspective. There is the kind of collective memory, the historical events that are brought to archive and the stories of the past, but there is also individual kind of testimonials or people also. So there are like different angles on it, right? And then this kind of creates a complex or more composed picture about history, which is not just this one series of events, of course, and not linear, but more from different angles. And this was really my next question. How do you think film or art in general can really kind of aid against this process of effacement of collective memory, of this erosion? I mean, through your work or in general?
Sorry?
Through your work, but also in general, or?
I mean, I don't know, for me, mostly my films have, or what I try to understand through the films is that the history is sometimes very covered, layered, that there are many layers, and to uncover them you need like not the future in the sense of the future, but you need a future thought at least for me, like where does it lead? Because you can repair the history in the sense of victims or like, but you cannot repair it totally with like what happened. But I think what you can do is you can learn from it for a future understanding. That's, for example, why in the film I try to ask young people, like, what do you think about history? And this kind of perspective on young people is always very important in my work also, because they are mostly the generation that gets they live with the impact of a past, so they live with these consequences, and how to deal these consequences is for me interesting mostly with young people. I think art can I mean, film especially, I think, can use many different methods to understand history. In my point of view, for example, I don't use much archive material. I rather maybe sometimes refilm the archive, but it becomes more something abstract, because archive material can be very abstract for me also. When other filmmakers are making like footage just with films just with archive material, which is a complete different method. Yeah. I think what I try to do, like also maybe I can tell about my new project is, which is in Albania. is that there I try to combine both, like using more archive material, but also like shooting and sometimes even showing the people I shoot the archive material. So it becomes kind of this circle.
Kind of a filtering process.
And they even start to interpret the archive material that they know. So this happens like in 1 or 2 scenes in the film. It's still not finished. But I think it's... and still there I try to find this kind of distance from a younger generation to the past and go to a generation that really experienced this, and to make understandable that there's always a filter that comes at the end. We don't know what reaches a generation that lives just with the outcome of a period. For example, in Poland it was anarchist movement to communism, to Second World War, occupation by the Nazis, then communism, and in my new film it's similar, but then you have 40 years of dictatorship of Enver Hoxha. So, and still you have a generation that lives with this kind of fragments of this past, and this is what I'm interested mostly.
And I wanted to quote another line from the film again, if that's okay. So you say also the reconstruction of history may help to understand oneself better. I mean, this kind of personal or more individual connection. I was wondering, maybe for you, on a kind of more personal level, how was this kind of process of making the film in terms of your kind of own belief or understanding, also in a larger context, or what do you feel it's kind of shaped in you during this process?
For Bialystok, I think, I mean, it made me more understandable that this region was very complex, and it is now still complex, but in the sense of that the conflicts became different. I think like now it's more the conflict, or what I understood, for especially with young people, if I stay or leave, for example. There's a big unemployment. So I think this kind of the film reconstructs a part of this history, but I mean with let's say a line that also is leaving a lot of things.
Of course. Yeah.
So, but I think with the film itself, I think for me it was more like, again, this kind of perspective also on a generation that lives in this kind of fragments of a city that tries to, if you walk through the city, tries to show you what happened, but mostly in a sense that okay, we have monuments, we have this and this is enough. So I think what is the most problematic with historical events is how to bring them to the people.
Yeah.
How do you really make understandable what happened in the city, and when does it stop? I mean, now it's since, like, for example, the German occupation, it's more than 70 years. Even that this kind of ghetto or uprising, or the ghetto in the city, it's not really told anymore that there were 60% Jewish people. And this is for me the interesting part. Like with the younger generation, it will rather, okay, you recollect this kind of thoughts, and you tell them and keep on going this kind of memory, or you just or it disappears. So, and for sure we know that different politicians and political systems try to shape their own narration, and it's kind of understandable in Poland from a more like, I mean, not that I defend this government, not at all, but this kind of sort of a constant invasion that happened from Germany once, then from Russia, and we were like never a free kind of nation, leads to something that is shaping a new kind of history that is, of course, leaving a lot of things on the side.
Of course, It's a kind of a response to this history on Poland.
And it's also kind of complex. I mean, not like that the people, but a historical complex. And I think this is the same with a lot of, Austria has the same historical complex. It was really huge. Then there was the big lie that we were invaded, or like the first invaded country by Nazi Germany, which was not true. So there is a kind of historical complex in all of these kind of things, and I think it's visible.
And this is what you kind of try to, I think, through the kind of your filmmaking approach to really kind of make visible, because there's also this interesting connection with the in the film with the play that we see at the same time, right? Where you kind of juxtapose this, and was this a choice you had already from the start, or?
It was a lucky moment because the play was just played one time, and then I don't know actually what really happened. I was talking to some people, but I think they didn't want to show it anymore. And then there was another, and I missed the first one, and then there was another event in November, I think in 2016, where they played it one time again. Because this is based on a book from a Polish author that was really deep researching in the city of this, in this history of the city, mostly about right-wing movements, etc. And for me, the interesting part, and I was asking, like, why you just show it one time? I mean, if you make a rehearsal, and there was not a real answer. It was mostly like, so this also stands a lot for like what do we want to show or what not.
What happens?
And culture is a space where you, like, theater is a space where you can discuss things, but if you don't show it. And I think it changed a lot after this period when I was shooting, because I think they have a new director now, and I'm not sure in which direction they went, but as we know, like, a lot of decisions who is running a theater, whatever, are made by politicians, and they are there to shape a kind of narration. What do you show
from their own? I was wondering because so your works, you present them in gallery spaces or installations, but also in film festival and in cinemas. So I was wondering if you recognize a difference between how you see your work as being read between this, say, the white cube and black box kind of environments.
I mean, I mostly start from cinema work. So mostly I start with the film, and hopefully this film is going to be shown in cinema or in festivals. And from this, sometimes I try to use also like the gallery space or the installation to show also things that are not basically working for me in the film. Because, for example, with the Bialystok film, I made a 3-channel installation with similar material, but a different, more like abstract context about the city and about it's called a history of ideas, also like how this kind of ideas of the city changed. And then I also went to make kind of like more like an installation with glass that used different also layers with glass plates and archive material. So I think it depends really on the project, but I like to start from the film and from the cinema space as a own work, and then try to use mostly from research material for another
to kind of use the gallery space as a place that the cinema didn't necessarily allow.
And it's interesting in the sense also that you reach like not a different audience, but still like, you know, give the possibility to use all the research you did, not just for one project. So and make it more open.
And to also utilize it to like a bit of a different experience, a bit of a different viewing experience. Okay, I'm afraid our time is up.
Okay.
That was short, but very interesting. So I'd like to thank you, Johannes, for joining us and taking the time. And thank you all for joining us for IMPAKT TV, and we hope to see you soon at the festival. Thank you.
Thank you.